everybody. Hello. Time to take your seats. Could those people back in the corner just kind of move in and take seats, please? Just a few more people need to come get seats. Okay, I guess that's good. Thanks very much. I'm Katie Curtin. I'm an architect, and I'm also the Senior Vice President and Treasurer of the Ontario Association of Architects. On behalf of the OAA, I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight to Berkeley Church. It's really great to see so many people come out for the 2018 Now lecture and to hear from this year's winner of the OAA Best Emerging Practice Award. Because all the tickets were claimed online, we want to ensure that everybody has a chance to hear the talk. So with that in mind, we're filming tonight's presentation, and it'll be available online to the membership at large and the public. So watch the OAA's Twitter feed and OAA News for more details early in December. This is the 4th year of the Now lecture series. Each of the practices in the previous Now lectures have tackled the establishing of a practice differently. Tonight, we get to hear from this year's winning practice, who also are forging a new practice in exciting ways. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Vanessa Fong, the OAA's VP of Communications, for her vision in establishing this lecture series 4 years ago. Vanessa has actively participated on the OAA Council for 5 years now, and she has made a difference. Vanessa, where are you? Where are you, Vanessa? Stand up. Let's give her all a big... Let's give her a big hand. She's worked very hard on council and made a huge change. Vanessa, who also has an emergent practice, recognized the possibility of presenting the profession with the opportunity to gain insights into what makes these young practices tick, while providing for the sharing of perceptions and knowledge between our newest practitioners and those with years of experience. We are a multi-generational profession, and we are at our best when we share our strengths with each other. Tonight, I encourage you to ask questions following the presentation and take this opportunity to meet as many architects, intern architects, students, staff, and guests as you can. We really want to get the conversation started and get people talking about the impact of architecture and where the profession is going. So enjoy the food, drink, and company. I encourage you to engage in conversations on architecture, design, and what practice can be. Now I'd like to introduce Amir Azadeh. Oh, I'm sorry, Amir. Azadeh. Oh, I get his name wrong every time. Come help me say your name. I've only known Amir for a number of years. Amir Azadeh. He's an architect, OAA counselor, and member of the Association. He's going to introduce our special speakers tonight. Thanks.
So thank you, Katie, and good evening, everyone. So before I introduce tonight's speakers, I'd like to take a moment to speak about the recent changes to the OAA Awards program. So the OAA Awards program is now running on a 2-year cycle with the Design Excellence Award, the Career Achievement Award, the Best Emerging Practice Award, celebrated in the even-numbered years, and the new Shift Architecture Challenge running in the odd-numbered years. So as you may be aware, we just rolled out the Shift Shift 2019 Infrastructure Architecture Challenge, and we are currently accepting submissions online. The aim of this challenge is to highlight the distinct contribution that architectural thinking can bring to addressing key societal issues. And this year's theme is infrastructure, and we are looking forward to see the many interpretations of this theme and the diversity in the architectural responses. This biennial program is open to Ontario-based individuals and multidisciplinary teams and architects with strong architectural backgrounds and expertise. And I'm very happy to say that includes students, intern architects, academics, and allied professionals. So for more information, we invite you to visit www.shiftchallenge.ca. And as always, remember that we are out there in the social media landscape, and we love to hear from you through the various channels. So please feel free to use the hashtag OAA now for all your selfies tonight, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook to get the latest news and follow the announcements from the OAA. And now, I'd like to introduce tonight's speakers and the recipient of this year's Best Emerging Practice Awards, Suulin Architects. Suulin Architects is a 6-person architecture firm located in downtown Toronto with an associate office in New York City. Licensed in both Ontario and New York State, they are working on projects in Toronto, Los Angeles, and New York. They are also both LEED and Passive House accredited in Canada and the US. So both Amy Lynn and James Chevelle have practiced the art of building for over 18 years. Amy studied at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she received her Bachelor of Science in Architecture. She also received her MArch, Master of Architecture, at Harvard University. Before working at Suulin Architects, she was a project architect at Shim Sutcliffe Architects in Toronto, in charge of the Sisters of St. Joseph project. And prior to that, she was an associate and senior designer at ENIAD Architects in New York City, with her principal projects being the Clinton Presidential Library, the New York Standard Hotel, and the Weill Cornell Medical College Research Building. James studied at the University of Toronto and received his BA in Architecture and Urban Studies in a cross-faculty, self-designed program overseen by the late Detlef Mertens and accredited by NCARB. Prior to working at Suulin Architects, he was a project manager at Shim Sutcliffe Architects, also on the Sisters of St. Joseph project. Prior to that, he worked at Todd Williams Billisian Architects in New York City, where he worked primarily on the Phoenix Art Museum extension and Cheatham residence. So Amy and James started their collaboration at Shim Sutcliffe Architects in 2008, working as co-project architects on the assisted living home for the Sisters of St. Joseph in Toronto. After completion of the project, they established Suulin Architects in 2014. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Suulin Architects.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction and for hosting this event tonight. We are grateful for our family and friends and colleagues here to celebrate this honor with us. I would like to thank the people in our office for all their hard work and dedication over the past 4 years. The work we are showing tonight is as much an extension of them as it is of us. Here they are. Sean, Valerie, me, Anzu, Amy, Andrew, and John V. So here is our office. Located in the heart of the annex, we occupy 2 floors of an old house owned by the Bloor Street United Church. We work in the dining room, we meet in the living room, and we build models in the attic. These are beautiful rooms with high ceilings and lots of light, filled with desks and paper and material samples and art. We can see and hear each other all the time, It's a cozy environment filled with reminders of how the work we do should feel. Thanks to the OAA Emerge program, we've had an excuse to spend time reflecting on our work over the past 4 years. This analysis and critique of our practice has caused some self-consciousness about how it is we actually practice. The word practice, both a noun and a verb, create questions for us about the work we do and how we do it. We ask ourselves, what does it mean to be in practice? What are the different facets of a practice, and what are the responsibilities of practice? We are in practice. We are practicing our art. We practice what we preach. We are out of practice, and so on. We have chosen a sample of work to share with you tonight, which represents a range of ideas and approaches and challenges for us. Unfortunately, much of the work that we've done over the past 4 years, including work that we've done with many of you, is not included here tonight. Our attic. I have been fortunate to work for Bridget Shim and Howard Sutcliffe in Toronto and Todd Williams and Billy Chen in New York City. Their employment, mentorship, and friendship is a big part of us being here today. Bridget has been a longtime mentor and friend since I was a student of hers at U of T. When Amy and I met, she was working at Polshek Partnership Architects, now ENIAD, in 2008. Amy agreed to move back to Toronto with me under the condition that she could work for a little while at Shim Sutcliffe Architects. Luckily, it worked out. One of the first pieces of advice that Bridget told us was we should design and build our own house as a way of starting a career in architecture, as well as giving us a place to live. Because we weren't exactly flush with money, we needed a mortgage. If you don't know this already, when you take out a mortgage with a bank for a house, you're not allowed to tear down the house. So we learned that we needed to find a house on a property where the house had no value. My brother had recently moved to Leslieville, so I decided I wanted to be in the same neighborhood. I scoured Leslieville for a house that was so run down that I could convince the bank to let us tear it down. Nothing was for sale that fit this description. However, I did come upon the perfect property. The house had been destroyed by raccoons that occupied it, and the bank confirmed that the house had no value. And this is it. It looks better than it really was. So we got ready to tear down the house, but the problem is that you cannot get a demolition permit without getting a building permit first. We had not yet designed a house and didn't have the money to build one anyway. We just wanted a clean slate. We had to convince the Toronto City Council to give us permission to tear it down, which we did. So from there, I tore it down with the help of my dad. So in 2008, we tore down the house and started the first of many designs of our house. And Amy and I considered the beginnings of an architecture practice with this house as our first project. I grew up working with my dad and brother, running a small design build company, and fully expected that we would be reunited to build this house. But unfortunately, the plan changed. Some time passed, and Amy's team at Shim Sutcliffe needed some additional staff. So in 2009, I was convinced to start working for Bridget and Howard with Amy on the new home for the Sisters of St. Joseph. The next 5 years brought an amazing mix of hard work and learning as we attempted to extend Bridget and Howard's hand with this project. We became parents, we grew up, we got older. In late 2013, the work on the Sisters of St. Joseph project was substantially complete, and the sisters moved in. By the spring of 2014, it was possible to leave Shim Sutcliffe and get back to the plan of doing our own work. In May 2014, Suulin Architects was incorporated, and I officially became the first employee. There are two projects that we consider our first projects that are both active to this day, and we consider both fortunate and unfortunate realities. The first is our house, still unbuilt, and the second is a research project. In many ways, both of these have occupied our thinking since early on, and considered together represent something of a mission statement about our goals and interests in architecture. This is a map given to me by my neighbor, who I think might be here, from 1896. And I'm going to get out my little laser pointer. And that right there is the house that we bought. That was the first house in the block when it was subdivided in that neighborhood. It wasn't worth saving, though. Our lot is situated in the heart of Leslieville. Atypical in size, the lot runs east-west and measures 30 feet by 250 feet. The result of a history of land division which saw some early established plots and houses maintain a morphology of the area from when Leslie and Sons nurseries dominated the commerce and organization of the neighborhood. We conceived of a house as two houses in one because we fully expected our parents to move in with us at some point, but thought it might be nice to live together when we wanted and separately when we didn't want to. While similar to a duplex, the house is still a fully connected single-family house whose two parts are divided into an eastern and western part and formally separated by a light well in the middle. This is the lot. Light well in the middle, front house for whichever parents moved in first, and our part at the back and above. The division of the eastern and western ends of the house creates an outdoor courtyard space at the lower level, bringing air and light into the center of the house. This feature also serves to break down the mass of the house into separate pieces that can be read from both the inside and outside. These spaces create room for light and air and plants to come into the boundary of the building. Views from inside the house extend to the garden and street, but also look back at the house itself. Amy is going to talk a bit about our second startup project, which is an ongoing research project. This project started informally after we first met and included travel and discussions about architecture. This eventually became more of a formal study when we applied for a research grant. For the past 10 years, these projects have existed parallel to each other.
Since we have been in the mode of reflection, I want to start off with an anecdote about my time as a student at MIT. I wouldn't be the architect that I am if it hadn't been for the extraordinary teaching I received there long ago. And I use the term extraordinary because there was a level of commitment to education which I have never seen again in any architecture school. It is at MIT where I learned the importance of placemaking, the importance of materiality, the urban fabric as a continuous landscape, and the importance of humanity. There were three professors who really imprinted upon me the soul of architectural practice. We looked at many examples. Sorry, I should introduce him. Morris Smith, a very feisty New Zealander. Pictured there in the hat, taught me how to make form with meaning. We looked at many examples of vernacular architecture where form came directly out of a rationale that might be related to a use or to climate or the way the light changes during the day, materials available in the area. This is a young Morris laying out the stone in the ground at a house he designed in the 60s called the Blackman House. Fernando D'Amico, a talented and rigorous architect from Chile, taught me that the eyes and the hand can never be replaced by a computer. He taught me that concrete was heavy, water reflected, metal was cold, and wood could float. He also taught me never to make a place where dogs go to die. And apparently, James tells me that this was a favorite comment of Todd Williams. This is an image of a beautiful church that Fernando designed in Chile. I actually spent some time helping him on this project with drawings and models after I graduated from MIT. Both Fernando and Morris never did anything in absence of considering the act of building or details of construction. Then there was a Hungarian professor, Imre Halasz. After escaping persecution numerous times and walking all the way back from Russia to Hungary by foot during the war, he was a self-prescribed urbanist and said he would never again need to walk in a forest. Imre used to tell me stories about Alvar Aalto's time at MIT. And one of the things he told me was that Aalto used to call on him and drag him to the full-size mock-up of the Baker House dormitory room. He would sit Imre around the room 4 hours at a time at various positions, moving the furniture around, asking Imre if he thought the height of the desk was right or the relationship of the bed to the window was good. This story about the care and thoughtfulness that went into understanding exactly how someone inhabits a space has really stayed with me to this day. James and I found the same commitment to detail at Shim Sutcliffe. In fact, for the Sisters of St. Joseph, we also built a mock-up of an entire room, and all the sisters came to spend time in it and gave us their feedback. As banal and obvious as this kind of exercise may seem, I think Imre summarized it best. He once said, for me, architecture means to organize a beautiful environment for people, and its form does not follow function, structure, simple physical reasoning, etc., but rather uses and molds them to achieve a harmonious expression. Before I continue, I want to also point out that back then, while I was at MIT, a certain Canadian architect was invited to speak. I remember very well Bridget Shim speaking under the dome on Massachusetts Avenue in a casual lecture. Even though she and Howard were just starting to make waves, their work was well admired at MIT, and the excitement was palpable. Little did I imagine that I would be working for them 20 years later. Imre unfortunately died in 2003, and a trust was established in his name. We decided to submit a proposal for a grant that was extended to MIT architecture alumni. The intention of the grant was to give architects the opportunity to step back from practice and take the time to reflect or study something they did not have the opportunity to do so in practice. So as we mulled over the beginnings of our practice, we asked ourselves, what did we want our practice to aspire to? I'd rather talk about other work. Though many things are important to us, we often start inside out and then return to the relationship between inside and outside and cultivating continuity between the two. This continuity strengthens our connection to nature and to the elements of air, water, and light. We are interested in how this relationship is made and also at the complete inclusion of the landscape or garden as an integral component of the architecture. For us, the garden should be an important and deliberate part of our practice, and we intend for it to be inseparable from our work. These are a few images from Koto-in Temple at the Daitokuji Temple in Kyoto. The architecture and culture of Japan, both past and present, intensely embodies this connection, and we proposed in our grant to use Japanese architecture as a lens through which to study this relationship. We've been fortunate to learn our craft within offices that place an emphasis on this connection between building and nature. We continue to develop a better sense of where we have been while looking at Japanese architecture in hopes of refining these values in our own work. In 1979, Arata Isozaki explored the meaning of ma in his New York City Cooper Hewitt exhibit, Ma, Space, Time in Japan. Isozaki describes the word ma as follows. Ma originally means the space in between things that exist next to each other, then comes to mean an interstice between things, chasm. Later, a room as a space physically defined by columns and/or byobu screens in a temporal context, the time of rest or pause in phenomena occurring one after another. Because the word ma is a stem of both the words space and time, the idea of this pause brings the three-dimensional zone between the inside and the outside to a level which can also capture the spiritual essence of traditional Japanese architecture and the society which is embodied in the built form. Traditional Japanese architecture is distinctive in its lack of clear delineation between the inside and outside. Layering of walls or screens, zones that can be either enclosed or open, pocket gardens within a building, or subtle changes in levels at entry points are among the finely nuanced methods of articulating space. Although highly refined, the traditional Japanese enclosure did not necessarily protect one heavily from the elements. In some ways, this reinforced the more intimate relationship with nature that is present in Japanese culture. Architect Kengo Kuma describes Japanese architecture as one that can control boundaries at will. That is, an architecture that can subtly adjust relationships between human beings and things, and between human beings and nature. It is not a self-centered sculptural architecture that is formally self-assertive, but an architecture of relationships, a regulating architecture that exists to control diverse relationships. We received this grant to study landscape and the integration of garden and landscape in Japanese traditional architecture. This has been an ongoing study that we run parallel to our work and the research we do for our work as a way of testing what we do and pushing the normal limits. At the heart of our interest is the ultimate goal to integrate landscape into more than something passive, but into something of a more active role. We are also looking at how landscape, in the form of light or plants or air, can impact the form of the building and engage the building. We look for every opportunity to do so in our work. One of the areas of focus in Japan is Takayama, a small town in the mountain region of Hida. This town is known for its skilled carpenters. This is the Takayama Jinya, local government offices from the Edo period, just outside the town center. What struck us that even in a modest building such as this, the same care and attention was taken to bring the outside in at every opportunity, as there is in such a building like the Katsura Villa. The gardens around the Jinya are much more modest, but they permeate the building so much that the building is really formed by this landscape. The old town of Takayama is centered around a pedestrian shopping street lined with some distinctive mercantile buildings. The scale of the street is very intimate. Greenery in all forms weaves in and out. There are places for plants, places for trees, places for entries. Some demarcations are made by a roof, some are a change in the texture or material in the ground, and some are made by screens, fabric hangings, or sliding wood screens. Here you can see the sliding screens that open up the storefront. change in level, and then beyond the openings to a garden and light. This is from the Yoshijima residence along the street, where layers upon layers of various screens and thresholds modulate between the interior spaces out to its gardens. Through often very intimate and small-scale entries, some of the buildings, such as the Kusakabe residence, feature some impressive double-height spaces and screens that then connect through to very intimate courtyards in the back. I guess it's probably time to move on. Luckily, to save ourselves from these two open-ended nonprofit projects, we got a small project to redo a kitchen at the back of a lovely townhouse in Cabbagetown. This project quickly led to a second project for a member of the same family. We were enormously fortunate to have these first two clients, who were born out of friendships of James's family. Despite a lack of our own portfolio, they entrusted us with their homes.
Our two first projects were in Cabbagetown. You can see where the circles are. I grew up in a house right there. Don Valley Parkway, St. James Cemetery, Riverdale Park, Wellesley Park. I grew up in Cabbagetown in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s and watched it change before my eyes. The gentrification seemed to reflect my own growing up, and it seemed natural. Houses got renovated, lots got filled up, additions got built, we got bigger together. Layers and layers were added to the houses as the money poured in, but much of what happened was speculative, in the spirit of the quick flip and not good. The house I grew up in was unique and amazing. Two small houses made into one, a kitchen in the basement with a fireplace as its focus, a tiny backyard with that was more of an outdoor room than a landscape, double-height spaces and open stairs that flowed into one another. It formed the basis of thinking about houses as homes and buildings as architecture. Doesn't every office start with a kitchen renovation? This was a beautiful house for a family that was about to expand quite rapidly. While the front of the house had high ceilings and felt very spacious, the kitchen at the back was grossly inadequate for a family that would eventually be 5, with grandparents walking in frequently from minutes away. This is the back of the house. And the interior of the kitchen, which you can see, was very dark, very short on counter space, and had no connection to the backyard. While this was a modest project, we felt good about the extent to which we expanded the functionality of the kitchen while also creating a social space within the kitchen that extended into the backyard. 200 square foot kitchen, deck at back, lane on the right. We extended the plane of the kitchen level by building a deck the size of the kitchen itself, just outside, so that the physical space of the kitchen was no longer confined. The window and door was the maximum size it could be. The window was an interpretation of a bay window, typical of the front of the house in the area, but within the kitchen. Its size, transparency, and built-in bench foster family collectivity and socializing, and created a direct connection to the outside. While the island created some badly needed counter space, it serves more as a bar across which people talk. This is the second project we did in Cabbagetown. This is the second cottage of a row of heritage-protected cottages on a tiny lane by the St. James Cemetery, which is to the top. you're not familiar, this is the Wellesley Cottages. This is the backyard of the property of our client. This was an addition that was done in the 1980s and is somewhat dismal and lacking. This is looking towards St. James Cemetery from the back door. This is the interior at the front of the house in the original cottage. There was a step down into the living room at the back of the house, which had extremely low ceilings and was particularly dark due to the overhang of the balcony above. The project began initially as a renovation that would include a new kitchen, master bedroom, bathroom, and living room. As our dialogue with the owner continued over numerous dinners and bottles of wine, the scope expanded to include a fully transformative living space addition and landscape extension that would include the full extent of the front and backyards. The first thing we did was to strip the layers of terraced decks and remove the overhanging balcony. This envelope was tricky as we wanted to avoid any zoning variances, and the site was extremely constrained. The intent of the addition and landscaping developed together and was created in reciprocity between the interior and exterior. The garden slips into the sides of the main living space so that from within the living room you are surrounded by the garden. A freestanding wall is clad using the Japanese technique of sosugiban, which improves the wood's resistance to fire and insects. The wall extends into the garden as well, defining one side of the interior and exterior spaces and reinforcing the continuity between in and out. You can see in the section that the roof of the addition is raised up is raised to open up the low ceilings of the original living space while creating a garden roof to look out over from the master bedroom. This was the first opportunity we had to shape the landscape extensively as part of the architecture. You can see in the section the different levels of the garden to negotiate the differences in grade between the house and the cemetery on the left. We lowered the shed so that at the top of the level you could see over the back to the main house and also be connected to the borrowed landscape of the cemetery. If you recall, the original shed was at the top and completely obstructed the connection to the cemetery. It's going to continue.
Here are some sketches looking at the hardscape, the garden. We used two different colored bodies of permeable pavers to break down the scale of the garden and to define the ground, accented by water-washed concrete at the stepped changes in level. This was the final plan of the garden. Seating area along this wall, concealed barbecue. This was the main planter with the focal tree here, and then a shed, the lowered shed, which created a little privacy in this raised terrace that connected to the cemetery. Not very well, but so in addition to designing all the hardscape in the garden, we worked with our gardener friend, Kathy Jones, researching and selecting plant types. Kathy showed us that there is no end to beautiful and interesting plants, and so this project we have been working on, since this project, we've been working on a database, so to speak, of plants that we use to try to create a more distinctive landscape that is also appropriate and sustainable. Here's a plant specification in progress. Here is a recent shot of the front of the house with Japanese anemone in full bloom, along with colored Japanese maples. I should mention the front of the house is protected heritage. So we just designed the garden in front. Here is the front of the house interior transformed. The existing glass block windows to one side. A bench adjacent to the stair navigates the change in level while serving as a guardrail to the basement. The garden is framed beyond. In this project, we also had our first foray into lighting and furniture design. We're starting to realize how expensive and how bad a lot of lights are. So we wanted to design and fabricate a line of lights that would satisfy different conditions. In this case, we needed a wall sconce. We wanted to create here a sculptural piece that played off the simple white walls of the space, sometimes looking like a fold in the wall and sometimes having a more positive light. An array of perforated openings allow some nuanced direct light through to supplement the indirect light. There's supposed to be some photos of these lights, but seem to be missing. This is one of the two benches we designed for the space. And now a view just from within the living room back to the front. Some of the original artwork and furniture in their new setting. And the new living space. The fireplace is clad in mild steel and the garden slipping behind it through the inside corner window. The burnt wood wall extends out to the garden. This is the detail of the wall with steel support for the Buddha head. And here the steel around the fireplace folds and extends up to the new raised ceiling. The master bedroom, where we designed the bed with the same language as the benches. The steel fireplace massing extends up through the bedroom. View out to the garden. And a slot window behind the wall lights the artwork. This is a view from the garden back to the house. We also designed the outdoor tables and benches using similar language with steel supports at the interior benches. Here you can see the wall extension from interior to exterior. Some details in the garden. The concrete steps. This was actually planting in the second year. Some fall color.
After these two first projects, our work took us to North York. In my past, North York was a place of hockey rinks, IKEA, and Mel Lastman. I must say it was somewhat foreign to me. But over the past 4 years, North York has become a place where we do a lot of our work. In 2014, we got 2 commissions to do projects quite close to each other near the intersection of York Mills and Leslie. One was a commercial project and the other residential. This project is an adaptive reuse of an existing warehouse and office building. The program was to repurpose the building into a multi-tenant, high-tech office complex with the building owner as the anchor tenant. The existing building was built in 3 phases over 50 years. The first consisted of a 1-story structure that was mostly a warehouse space with a small office space on one side. The building was set back from the street and elegantly designed and built. It was designed by J.B. Parkin. Over time, a 1-story addition was added to the east end of the original building, and later a 2-story addition to the west end facing the road. The design standards of the original building were lost on the expanded building. And seeing photos of our son in all of our photographs remind us how time passes. He's 4. The structure of the west and central parts of the building had to remain, while the east end of the building would need to be substantially modified to suit the owner's needs. Here's the plan with a series of buildings from east to west. This ended up being a 2-story portion of the building. The original warehouse building by Parkin, which is hard to see in the photos in terms of what I would call elegant, is in the middle, and then the 2-story precast addition at the front. The budget was constrained in comparison to the expectation of our client, so we had to decide with what means we could achieve a few of the key elements that would elevate this new office development. High ceilings, open plan, abundance of light, concrete floors, and building performance were all on the client's wish list. The client wanted to have the flexibility with the tenant spaces, and so we maintained the organization of the buildings as 3 separate parts, which each had their own entry points. The building had parking all around, so each section needed to be accessible from both the north and the south. We inserted 2 north-south corridors through the central and east end buildings, here and here, as a way of making them accessible from both sides. The central space was split into 4 tenants. The central building was split into 4 tenant spaces, and the wide corridor provides a simple amenity space for benches, planters, and tables to be used by tenants and their guests. This space is filled with changing light from the continuous glazed clear story above. The client and his company would occupy the East End building, which was completely transformed into a 2-story building. He could access his space from the north and south, and the large conference room was located between these 2 entry points at the center, facing the double-height atrium in the middle. This is the second floor plan, which shows the atrium space and mezzanine space at the rooftop terrace. And the section through the clear story of the 2nd story addition. We did not have the budget to completely reclad the building on the west end. We stained the existing precast concrete and modified the base of the building so that the 2nd floor of the building floated more and the building did not sit as heavily. We also opened up the primary entrance at the northwest corner to better define it. We had some plan to incorporate more landscaping, but these were not implemented. This is the north side of the building with the 2 entry points, and in the foreground, the existing vertical connection of the front building, which we reclad and finished with vertical wood fins, is visible here. The entire building, except for the existing precast panels at the west end, had a completely new envelope, which includes precast and aluminum cladding, new roofing, and a high-performance glazing system incorporating wood fins at the south and west facades, and a custom pressure plate everywhere else. We created a new precast concrete base around the entire perimeter, on top of which the taut curtain wall sits. The east building is where our client runs his own company, an energy sector engineering firm. Aside from creating office space with high ceilings and lots of light, we created a distinctive roof with exposed Douglas fir structural decking supported by sleek steel beams. The entry is accentuated by a denser row of wood fins and deep recesses at and above the entry. So we use the same language all around the building, but use these elements a little differently to distinguish the building from the rest of the complex. We use simple precast walls at entry points to define each entry with their ramps and stairs, along with steel planters. All of the building interiors have been completely renovated, including all new building systems. The building was designed to LEED Gold standards, which is still in the process of accreditation. This is the shared atrium space for tenants in the central building, which also has exposed Douglas fir decking. This is the double-height atrium space at the east end building with the main open stair. The egress stairs were also done in wood, but they could be used for day-to-day circulation. The space was intended for one tenant, but is currently split into two. There are automated light shades which control the light throughout the day to conserve energy. Most of the space is an open office, with some glazed offices flanking the north and south walls. This image shows the main conference room below, and the steps to the mezzanine level above, which leads to the outdoor terrace. The light from the west-facing facade brings light into the depth of the space through the double-height atrium. The mezzanine space houses a smaller conference room, as well as a kitchen and breakout spaces for the office. The outdoor space serves as both a social and recreational space. The next project is a residential project also in North York, which is currently in the final stages of construction. Like the previous project we just showed you, we try to break the common tendencies found in these types of developments. The context of this house is a typical suburban neighborhood filled with large McMansion-type developments characterized by massive closed boxes. We knew that our client wanted something different, and the presentation of precedents to us confirmed that there was an opportunity here to do something good and in keeping with the type of work we wanted to do. While the general design approach is one thing, size and scale are another, and we quickly realized that the owner wanted to maximize the size of the house. This is an issue we are commonly faced with, and the challenge of being asked to design the biggest building possible or exceeding it through variance approval from the Committee of Adjustment, or even the OMB in this case, is the typical start of many of our projects. We accepted this even though this is not the approach we would have normally recommended. So we looked for ways to break down the scale of the house as much as possible.
Here is the site plan of the house. The house is organized around a full-height atrium and stair, which connects all the levels of the house. A courtyard is inserted in between the living and family rooms, bringing light into the heart of the house. This was really a building that we conceived of from the inside out. We made every effort to physically engage the light and the outside by creating different volumes of exterior space within the house while still affording the family privacy. Double-height gym at the lower level extends courtyard outside, which then connects to the ground floor level with large stadium steps. The kitchen pushes out with a large window box overlooking the outdoor dining space. And the office space here also carves out to the ground and to an equally large equally dimensioned courtyard, bringing light in from the south. These moves hopefully ground the building, connect to the outside in a way which we hope will really change the way spaces can be used and experienced. The client is a family of 5 with 3 kids who care deeply about the quality of life for their kids and wanted the spaces to be lively and open. Central atrium interconnects the different spaces while each have their own territory through split levels. This section here shows the entry, the atrium with the girls on this level, and then the boys, the boy in the master bedroom on the top level here. And in here we inserted a mezzanine study overlooking the kitchen. We wanted to preserve the privacy of the family while giving them a sense that light and views permeated the house and that all the spaces extended to the outside. The stair is a light stair hung from the ceiling and fabricated out of steel. It was our first collaboration with an artist friend from New York, Karen Schaefer. She did a number of drawings for us, and then we incorporated it into the guardrail of the stair. Overlooking the gym, which extends to the outside. The kitchen, looking back to the gym, which will have a wood screen in between. The gym extending to the outdoor courtyard.
As always, we were challenged by many of the client's ideas about how and where to spend the money. In addition to this challenge, we are often confronted by incomplete information about construction costs. In these types of single-family residential projects, where spaces between houses is very limited, there's often a tendency to want to treat the sides differently and spend the money where it counts, so to speak. We really try to discourage this approach and advocate for using a less expensive material everywhere rather than have sides of a house be incongruous with each other. On the exterior, we used a simple stacked brick accentuated by the same burnt wood boards imported from Japan to bring some warmth to the overall facade. The canopy at the front is a combination of steel and wood. Will be. We have spent some time on potential larger scale projects, investment projects that were either at a marketing phase or an exploratory phase. This has afforded interesting studies of zoning regulations as well as costing considerations. While these were all based on developer budgets, we were able to take some liberty in the interpretation of the program and develop some ideas that are not necessarily within the typical developer boundaries of possibilities. We're going to briefly talk about 2 projects. This project is a study for a client whose property was about to be impacted by a very large high-rise development, so they felt compelled to explore options for aggressively developing their own property. We did a number of studies taking into consideration all the various scenarios based on zoning. We had a building on our property that was likely to be designated as a heritage property, so we designed the building around this building, creating an entry space into the condo, and then designed the corner of the block for retail space. We proposed double-height garden spaces within many of the units as a way of creating a real outdoor space that could be better modulated from the winds at the high elevations of the tall buildings. This is a critique of the typical developer propensity to put little balconies all the way up a building attached to the facade where it usually is not big enough or not usable for most of the year. Only a little ventilation at high elevations is required to make it feel like a breezy spring day. So the idea of having an entirely functional space with the real possibility of a decent-sized garden in this typology seems valuable, as they can have the flexibility to use the space more as an interior space. This is another project in North York. We were approached by a client from Vancouver who really liked our first office project on Scarsdale Road. She purchased a similar building and wanted us to prepare a design for redevelopment on this property. She wanted to maintain the existing building and build something behind it. This happens to be the building that the OAA is currently working at. Initially, we were to do a preliminary design, package targeting an ambitious budget. The client wanted open spaces with lots of light through high-performance glazing and aspired to a Google-type office environment with social and amenity spaces. To cut the cost of the building, we made a decision with the client to do above-grade parking, which seemed like the only feasible option in North York, where parking requirements are quite hefty. The project turned into a full-fledged branding and marketing exercise, and the client gave us a lot of freedom to conceive programmatic elements of the building. We did all of the graphics and renderings for the package and called it the Cloud Campus. As always, we tried to break down the scale of the project and create spaces that extend to the outdoors. Here are some shots of the marketing package. The Junction neighborhood, let's finish with that one. The Junction neighborhood has undergone a massive transformation. The redevelopment of the old Viceroy building at 1655 DuPont is a response to those changes. The building currently houses offices and self-storage uses, which include a large tech firm as an anchor tenant. The dominant use as a self-storage company underutilizes the building's potential on many fronts. DuPont has happily been our first semi-public project where we have been able to test our agenda of continuity with the landscape at a larger scale. This was a project of seemingly small architectural interventions, and we wanted to make these subtle changes which would transform the way space was used and increase both pedestrian traffic and activation of the public corridor spaces. We worked to relocate parking from the front to other areas of the property behind. We targeted the silo as an ideal branding element for the redevelopment as part of the plan to intensify connections to the west railpath corridor. The parking lot was reconceived as a place that could alternately serve as a courtyard for public events and markets. We designed the paving and canopies to have a language inspired a bit from the existing geometry of the building plan, retaining wall that reflected the geometry of the rail path, as well as the dynamics between the juxtaposition of the busy traffic, the west rail path over the road, and opening up a building which has been largely used as storage into a place with more life. The landscape is designed to encourage connections and give room for social interaction while bring some green to the hard surfaces of the building.
Detox Market is at the forefront of natural beauty, opening their first pop-up shop more than a decade ago. It is a business that Romain, the owner, is very proud to say was started on $2 Mexican lettuce crates in LA. The shop took off and never looked back. We had an opportunity, this being our first retail project, to reconceive what this shop should look like and new shops after. the shops have the same language, or would they be all different, or would they be identical? Despite its success, Roman wanted the shop first and foremost to be accessible. The detox market sells a range of products, and they adamantly didn't want the shop to be intimidating. We were really interested in the aspect of accessibility and also the natural component of the product. The connection to nature and creating a space that is inviting. How do we make a place that is about beauty, but down to earth? How do you do it in less than 300 square feet in a subterranean space where potential customers are moving at 60 kilometers an hour, which is Union Station? We went through an enormous number of iterations and mock-ups of various ideas. And I'm just gonna flip really quickly through some of these, but this is actually the plan, the plan that we ended up with. Reflected ceiling plan. But just to show you some of the initial concepts that we looked at, we explore the concept of faces and facets and the idea of using different natural woods to represent different people. I'm just going to quickly go through the hundreds of iterations here. We also, Union Station is had a very low ceiling and a very well-coordinated mechanical plan, if you can imagine. So there was virtually no space in the ceiling anywhere. So we originally proposed to grab any space that we could to get height in the design, but we ended up pulling back on the complexity of that. We also looked at different, because the detox market curates many different products, we wanted to present them in an even way. So we looked at how we could incorporate the millwork to be the stands for the products, to create a more uniform. These are just some of the woods that we looked at. This is a very disgruntled millworker who we asked to do our mock-up. And the client felt that if the space was over-designed, it could be intimidating. So we had to strike a balance. So we settled for a feature wall, which was a variation on crates, harking back to the roots of the detox market, while creating a new form to personify the brand. And we simplified the details in ceiling and millwork. This is just, again, additional iterations of crates. This is the final space. The shape of the island was driven by the aim to differentiate the sea of products, but also to give space within the narrow shop for people to really linger over things and feel that they can take their time. This would be very different if the island was just straight. The island had different levels, and the transition between levels was shaped for signage. As I mentioned, we wanted to create a way to display the different sized products. So we created, in the end, we created a series of modular wood blocks which would work for different sized products and a different number of products. And we did mock-ups to test the ease and layout of these blocks on the island. was the one little space that the mechanical equipment did not occupy. We also did this is a very small shop in the Century City, LA, which is a sort of high-end mall that has been in the process of rejuvenating its building and bringing in new vendors. This was even smaller than Union Station, and it is only a 2-year lease, so the intervention and budget had to be appropriate to that. So we kept the millwork straightforward and created a simple, dynamic, and colorful series of shelves that related to what we had started at Union Station, but was more reflective of our sense of LA. The New York City flagship is the 3rd store we've done with the detox market. So we have the benefit of knowing a lot about both the workings and products of the detox market, but also the atmosphere that Roman seeks to have in his shops. And at the same time, New York City is where both of our careers in architecture were really born, so it was special to be able to work on this particular project. From the first shop we did with Roman, we knew that the design of the shops needed to reflect the purity of the products, and wood was an obvious choice, both for its warmth and natural qualities. We'd spent a lot of time considering different species, but had arrived at a white ash, which provided a bright and clean backdrop to showcase the products. We also chose ash because it is more stable and the color was less likely to alter. While this has been a constant element in the 3 shops, each location is very different. We always want to respond to the particulars of each place. For New York, we were really inspired by Roman's vision for this flagship shop. He explained to us that he saw this as a center for green beauty and a place for community. We wanted to make a place where the source of some of the botanical ingredients could be featured. And customers could see and experience some of these plants. Plants like jasmine, lavender, and ylang-ylang are mixed in with hardier plants to create an authentic environment that really speaks to the carefully selected products. So in the shop, the design of the planters are fully integrated into the cabinetry for the shop. We also took some cues from the strong arches of the building, using softer curved lines to shape the primary wall of shelves, which serve to interweave the plants and the products. That's the first floor. So some similar islands to Union Station, sort of feature sink in stone. Line of shelves here. The second level serves as a sort of residency for special workshops and events and offices. It was intended to have the feel of an apartment. And the roof terrace is a place for events in the summer. Bar, simple bar here. And there were existing planters, but we selected all the plants and planted them all. I think that we could not have found a better site for this flagship shop. This unique site stands at the confluence of some spectacular neighborhoods, and I feel that it has a special New York quality of being very, very much out there on the very loud street of Houston, yet completely hidden on Elizabeth. To me, that is a lot of what New York City is about. discovering places that are actually right there. We have often slipped through this block on our way to Lafayette or the Bowery many times. After such a long absence of anything occupying the length of this block, it's been fun to watch people who almost walk by without noticing that there's anything there, and then suddenly realize that there is finally life here. We also could not have had a better partner than the contractors from Eurostruct, the owners of which also happen to run the bar next door. So this was very convenient. Tom and Jerry's is a New York City establishment in itself. So I think that this could not better represent the community of New York City and the serendipity that you often come across in this city.
And briefly, the last project we're going to talk about is a return to Curzon Street, and the first and unfinished project. We recently redesigned it for what will hopefully be the final time. And next spring, our plan is to start construction of the house, which we are hoping will be both a passive house and net zero house. The house now conforms to its as-of-right zoning, which has been a challenge. We wanted to come up with a creative solution to the archaic constraints of the zoning, which dictate sloped roofs and dormers. We've incorporated indoor garden space that can be used all year round as a winter garden during the cold months, and it can be opened up in the summertime. So there's a number of parts of the house that have double facades as a way of meeting passive house requirements, but still having a lot of light. So this is one location at the back. The hope is to be able to garden all year round, in addition to enjoying the plants and benefit of plants in the indoor environment. The lower area is scooped out of the ground so that we don't have a real basement condition, and the last thing we're just going to show is just quickly a few of the other projects that we've worked on the past 4 years that are either under construction or finished, and we just didn't feel there was time to talk about them. This is the same. A house in Rosedale and a large existing house with extensive addition renovation, done with the interior designer Nina Bazian and Den Bosch and Finchley contractor. A house, a barn in Malmer, which is the first phase of a multi-building project we are currently doing with the client there. A house in the annex undergoing a massive transformation while attempting to retain some of the integrity of the original house. Spec house in Dallas. The sort of continuation of the project in Malmer. Pop-up shop for Detox Market. And lastly, a spec house that we did with my brother that is just completed. Thank you.
the shorter one. Okay, well, thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed our now lecture with Suulin Architects. And I want to sincerely thank all of you for participating in tonight's event. But it's not over. So we invite you to stay and keep this conversation going. Mix and mingle with your peers and profession. I encourage you all to also get involved in the OAA through membership, volunteer opportunities, our blog, which has the word OAA embedded in it, so blog or blog, Twitter and Instagram. Come find me tonight and get more information at www.oaa.on.ca. So volunteers are of tremendous value to our community. By participating, you can be the steward of the power that you have to shape the profession of architecture in Ontario. So please consider volunteering. And be sure to check out www.shiftchallenge.ca. The submission deadline is in little more than 2 months. Thank you and have a wonderful night.
Certain kind of light that never shines on me. I want my life to be here with you. I want to be with you. There's a way